Okay,
Would you be so kind to read a story, Nathan?
let's start off with a story so we kind of know what we're talking about here. As all of you, I think, know, these are true stories of things that have happened on the routes that I drive right here in Seattle. It's October 24th at about, I'd say about 11:30 p.m. or so. 3rd and Prefontaine Place, northbound. Nobody's first idea of a safe place to wait for a bus at night. You know the terrain, the way the little things all add up. Uneven sidewalks, an out-of-commission reader board, the magnificently poor lighting, almost as if on some city planner's evilly gleeful purpose. The tents and cries from over there, tensions boiling across the street. And you, clutching whatever you clutch in your pocket, trying to be gracious in your thoughts as figures lurk about, shifting on the dark urban floor, letting you know they're alive. I roll up slowly in my number 7. I open the doors to a zone with 2 people, neither of whom wants my bus. A young white woman, early 20s, in a demure white puffy jacket and nondescript ponytail and jeans. She looks at me through the open bus doors. The other person is called Chosen. Chosen is a Black American man, 2 generations too old to be sagging his pants, but he does it anyway. Every tatter of clothing on his body sags, and the phrase, dressed in rags, is here, finally, not an exaggeration. If you depicted him in a painting as he is, exposed skin and frayed dead fabric, viewers would accuse you of caricature, saying no man ever over 40 really stumbles about in this bad a shape, with a face like that. Because his face is magical. The unkempt beard cannot conceal the beauty of his features. Look now at those high cheekbones and the perfect cheeks below them, hollow, like I wished mine were when I was little. His symmetrical eyebrows and sockets and the big emotive eyes within them, expressive eyes. Thin skin and gaunt bones with a perfectly proportioned and evocative face. He should be in the movies. You want this guy to play a Black Jesus. I think he'd be perfect. He may have a drinking problem, sure, but so did Richard Burton. I will always have a soft spot for Chosen because I once saw a group of girls pepper spray him on my bus for no other reason than that they thought it was funny. You know you want to, they laughed at each other, with the same voice you would use for ordering fast food or trying on jeans. They violated him because he was helpless and homeless, and it amused them to destroy something beautiful, like a child stepping on a butterfly. It was the second ugliest thing I've ever seen. The stinging tears streamed down those beautiful cheeks of his, the Jesus cheeks. And I sat with him as he sat blinded, after everyone else had run off, and tried to guide him toward the doors. Tonight, Chosen is in far better circumstances. Same tattered garb as usual, but no apathetic gangster gaggle of girls to worry about. Between the 2 of us, hopefully I'm the only one who even remembers the incident. He is slinking about on the sidewalk, mildly disoriented as per character, closer to me than the young woman in the white jacket. I recognize him and call out a nonchalant hello, just another acquaintance at the office. Oh, hey, Chosen. Hey, how you feeling? He says, oh, pretty good. Right on, man, have a good one, I say. All right, he says, genially, slinking onward, receding into the night shadows. The high point of my entire night was the woman's smile. She had watched the interaction, and the 2 of us locked eyes now. I grinned in return, cheekily. Her smile was the smile of relief, where you don't realize you're letting down your tensed shoulders. Everything's fine. Sometimes everything's just fine, she almost laughed. The inherent silliness of our banal pleasantries and good-natured tones juxtaposed with Chosen's terrible appearance and the pleasure of her discovering what this bus stop can be. That guy wasn't a threat. He was just some guy with a name and a friendly bus driver who knew him and who was clearly enjoying being out here at this hour on this block. We both smiled wide, teeth gleaming, and I think we both kept smiling our separate ways for a while afterwards. Thank you. Okay, Quinn, let's talk about this book. Wow.
Well, like, whenever talking about your book, it's just a pleasure not only to read your words, but to hear you read them. You bring such voice to your writing. And I would love to hear you talk about that sense of voice and how you develop your style as a writer. Like, how do you create that sense of voice?
I care a lot about rhythm, about form. when you think of your favorite films, for example, it isn't just that they have great stories. It's also that they're spectacularly photographed and edited and directed. Even if we're not familiar with film form, or film theory, we unconsciously process that it deeply elevates the subjective experience, the emotional experience of taking in art. And I feel the same is true of books. You want there to be not just something interesting that was recorded on a surveillance camera. You want elegant camera work. You want sound design that makes sense. You want music. And so in terms of prose, I try to do something similar where I'm aspiring for the novelists that I'm particularly fond of. I love reading 19th century literature. If it's written between, I guess, 1820 and 1950, I'm all over it. I'm there. It's the age of the novel. And although this is a book of nonfiction short stories, it's hopefully feels literary. It's reaching. We always reach to do something. Great. And so that's what we're seeking to do here, to have it feel literary. There's an author I very much admire, Don DeLillo, and starting with his novel, The Names, when he was writing his novels in draft form, he would type out each paragraph on his typewriter on a separate piece of paper. The final book is not like that, but in looking at each paragraph on its own, that helped him think about rhythm and the sort of musicality of the sentence. The English language is very large, because it steals so many words from other languages. So you can always find another word that means what you're trying to say, but accomplishes more in terms of music. I read out loud every one of these stories before we put them in the book, not because nobody's ever going to read this whole book out loud, but I want it to feel like it has that sense of movement, where the form excites as much as the content. That's my very long-winded answer. Thank you.
You spoke about wanting your book to feel literary. I also want to attest that it feels cinematic. You talked about, you immediately compared your sense of rhythm to filmmaking, and you are a filmmaker. Can you talk about how, for me it feels cinematic with the way we jump through different characters, different arcs. How have you organized the book to kind of create that effect?
I think we respond to cinema for a couple of reasons. One, because it's all art forms combined into one art form. That's very exciting. Another is that in harnessing only our vision and our hearing, it approximates dreaming quite closely. And the way we think is often similar to like a nonlinear film. Our mind jumps around constantly. We do not think linearly. We live life linearly, but we process it all over the place. And so this book is organized not chronologically in the strict sense, but following sort of emotional chronology, because the book is in large part about processing difficult times, difficult grief, etc., trauma. How do we do that? By reflecting on the past, by jumping around in our heads and building something inside that to us makes sense in a linear sort of fashion. So this book is very much designed to be read in order. There's a temptation to pick it up and randomly read different stories. That's fine, I'm not going to tell you how to read the book, but I would encourage you. I think you'll get more out of it if you read it in order, because it's designed to build on itself. There's a story in here about a guy who's vulnerable and sensitive, a little bit similar to the story we just read. And then the story that we place right after that story is also about a guy with a similar physical appearance, but we don't say anything about whether he's vulnerable or sensitive. But we're thinking that as a reader, because we just read the previous story. Stuff like that is how we're trying to have all these stories talk to each other and build something on a subconscious level. In cinema, the essential unit of meaning is the cut. You have two images, two shots, and you combine them, put them next to each other to create a third thing, the meaning, which is what the viewer brings to the experience. And we're trying to do that here too. I think we all have. Remember when you would make mixtapes for your friends or mix CDs, and you would spend actually a really long time on the order of the songs? That's because that's where you make it personal. You're creating an experience for them. And that's what we're seeking to do here, sort of using those concepts from cinema in a book.
Not only is there a meaning creation in the organization of the stories, the curation of the stories, there's also a sense of meaning because we do follow some character trajectories. Lulit is a character in the book that I particularly connected to, and you're also a character in the book. Can you talk about your decision to include some of your own personal experience and personal stories in Deciding to See?
Gosh, there's so much I want to say in response to that. So the stories range from 2003 to 2024. Although they're nonlinear, they do maintain a sort of vague chronology that is linear because we come back to some of the same characters over and over and watch how they kind of rise and fall in their lives. Of course, I'm also in all the stories, and I don't particularly like writing about myself or making the whole thing about me. The first book was, this is the second book, the first book was very much the focus is entirely on the passengers, because that's what interests me. But a lot of feedback was like, well, what about this other character who's in every single one of the stories, the bus driver? We want to know more. And also, this is a way of if I share more of myself in the stories, it reminds us that the other characters have their own inner battles that they're fighting too. We don't get to see those battles as much, but we can share mine. And so we move out of the bus here. There's also stories, street encounters in other countries, things that happen to me when I'm not working, and I'd like to believe it provides a fuller picture.
I know that when you are writing a story, the events happen and it takes sometimes a while for you to tell a story. And then there's been a further kind of time put into curating this. The events that you weave through the book take place in 2015. Why talk about them now? Why wait so long? Why wait between the event and the story?
Okay, so this is where I quote Paul Currington, a thing I do very often. He's here tonight, runs Fresh Ground Stories. And he encourages you as a storyteller to write from your scars, not your wounds, to tell stories after they've had time to heal, because then you can see them better. Of course, hindsight, as we know. And yes, we're going through difficult times. We're now living in history rather than in between historical periods, as it were. And that can be unpleasant. I don't feel qualified to write intelligently about the times we're going through now because I have no hindsight on our current period, nor does anyone else. But I do have hindsight about something that happened to me in 2015. I was in the terrorist attacks in Paris that happened in November of that year. And I write about that here, not because I think it's an incredibly important event, but because it is a traumatic event that hopefully the reader transposes whatever it is they're going through while processing something right now. And it's something I have enough time away from to write about, hopefully intelligently. Yeah, I feel like the great project of living now is figuring out what is our perspective, how do we move forward, how do we think, to discover that the world is both more beautiful but also more terrible than we had previously imagined can be disorienting.
And your stories, I think, not only as a collection try to look at the shadows and the light, but I think each story in itself wants to embody that complexity. Like the story you just had about Chosen, you're no holds barred describing his clothes, and you're no holds barred describing his personality and his face. Can you talk about the process of writing a single story when the events happen on the bus, and then how do you find that balance?
In answer to the question you had a moment ago, I realized I didn't answer. I do this thing where I talk for half an hour and I don't answer the question. I'm sorry. But yes, sometimes I have to wait months or sometimes longer after an event takes place because I don't know how to write about things I don't understand. And sometimes it takes time to come to any kind of understanding about an event. And particularly for the more challenging events, I'll sit on them for months. I'll take notes for them right after they happen. So how this works is something on the bus happens that's interesting. Often it's a conversation. As soon as they get off the bus, I reach for a scrap of paper or one of those paper transfers, a paper towel or something, and then I just pray for a red light. I'm hoping for a red light. When you want there to be a red light, there never is. And then I try to get down, especially the dialogue. The other elements of what took place are easier to reconstruct later, but what people actually said is very important to me. Regional and culturally specific dialects, word choice, how they sound out their vowels, volume. These all form sort of a verbal body language that tells us so much about a person. And instilling that into the writing allows the character to sort of share themselves as they are, beyond just me saying, you know, here's what they were wearing or what I think of them. And so I'll take all those notes, I'll sit on it, and then eventually I'll write it. And this involved a lot of rewriting and took about 5 years or so to make this feel like a cohesive whole. Is that answering what you're asking, Quinn?
It does.
Well, thank you.
I'm curious, after having so much time elapsing between events on the bus, do people in your life that are in these stories, do they read these stories? Do they feel like they see themselves?
You know, it's surprising how rarely that happens. I get a lot of comments from passengers who like the book or who are aware of the book in North Seattle. I get a lot of comments in South Seattle that are not about the book, but that are just appreciating me as a bus driver, or they don't read the blog. There are exceptions. I remember heading down Rainier Avenue once, and there used to be a guy outside of Burger King. His name's Travis, and he would dress up as a king outside of Burger King. I'm not clear if the costume was a reference to the restaurant or not, but he had this like a toy sword. He had a crown, he had a cape, and a beard fit for a king. And I would always sort of honk and wave, and he would be panhandling in the middle of the road, so he was highly visible. And you couldn't miss him, and especially if there was a red light, we would have a moment to say hello. Again, red lights are just the savior for. I often feel community is built out of inconvenience, not convenience. You know, so you have to interact or get to interact. And Travis came over to me one day and he said, "Hey, I read that thing you wrote about me," and I got very nervous. What if he didn't like it? Because I wrote this story about him and his girlfriend, and I was concerned because I had posted that story on The Urbanist, and a lot of people read The Urbanist. Travis reads The Urbanist, and that's how I knew about this story. And we have Ryan Packer here tonight who runs The Urbanist. And he loves the story. He had somebody print it out, and he keeps it close to his heart, and I was so glad that he liked it. I haven't had people come up to me and tell me they passionately hate their portrayal in the story. I try to do this thing where I present them in neutral terms, either neutral or positive. There's no ranting in here. I hate this guy, I hate this guy. That's just, there's an artist I admire, a writer, who says, all art must either forgive or forgive the character for being unable to forgive. There's more value there.
Was that E.J. Coe?
It was her writing teacher who told her that, and she passed that on to us. Yeah.
You spoke about community, and community building is part of your self-description. Did you start writing stories immediately upon driving the bus? Was that something that you set out to do? And how do you build community? Do people know that you were going to write stories about them, or? They don't. Okay, so this started, I was a couple years into bus driving, and I would always have bus stories. You know, everyone has bus stories, and as a bus driver, you have a lot of them, so you're always telling people all your best stories, especially the positive ones. I tend not to repeat the negative stuff too much, because then it sticks in my head too much. I try to instead think, okay, what am I going to do next time? Because whatever it is that happened will happen again, and I want to prepare myself for the next time.
but for these beautiful, positive things. You know, that sort of neurochemical buzz you have when you have a positive interaction with a stranger, it feels so good. Why does it feel so good? It's just small talk. You're talking about sports or dogs or weather. But it's the sense of connection, this belonging with humanity at large. Oh my goodness, I have something in common with everybody. Feels fantastic. And I would share these stories, and friends of mine would say, you need to start a blog. And what I heard when they said that is, you need to sit in front of your computer all the time, and instead of living life, document life. And I didn't want to do that. And they said, you've got to do it. It's a service for the people. You have to. And I thought I would give it a try just as a kind of, here's to show my friends, here's what I'm doing when I'm working, type of thing. I was very surprised when it became popular. And then that morphed into the book. It was not I daydreamed about a book, but I didn't think a book was possible. Tom Eichmann's the graphic designer of both this and the previous book, The Lines That Make Us, was the one who approached me about the idea of doing a book. Tom Eichmann's is here tonight. And I wanted to comment a little bit on design, and maybe Tom, if you would like to contribute a few words after that. Hell, I see a hand. It's the hand of Tom, the genius designing hand. Okay, so as you can see, this front of this book does not have any buses on it. The first book is a picture of a bus timetable. It exactly replicates, because it's a government document where the design isn't copyrighted, you can use the same colors, the same font, everything. It's precisely what those old timetables were. Tom and I had a really fun time designing that. We'd sit out there on 3rd and Union and look at the color green. Does this match the green in the bus that's driving by, etc. We had a lot of fun making that. But then Metro redesigned the bus timetables. They no longer have that classic look. They stopped looking cool. And we couldn't have the second book be the new bus timetable design. Also, people use their phones instead of paper timetables to look for bus stuff. And it was time for a totally new design. And because I'm not a designer, I thought, ooh, we can have a picture of a bus stop. It'll be amazing. And I'm really glad that didn't happen. This is why I'm not a designer. Tom, on the other hand, is. Tom, would you want to share a little bit about how you came up with this design? This is Tom, the genius designer. I'm his very lucky.
Thank you, Nathan. Hi, Gwen.
Hi, Tom.
I could talk about design of these books all night, but I won't. As Nathan said, the first book was based on the bus schedule kind of format, and the typography, the colors, the structure of the schedules and everything kind of lent themselves to the structure of the book. And if you look at the table of contents, it's very much intentionally kind of presented as almost an infographic of where the stories took place, what routes they were based on, what dates. Everything's very kind of data-driven, which is kind of the gateway into these very humanistic stories. The second book had a very different intention, where it was much more about telling this much more in-depth series of stories from different perspectives, whereas the first book was kind of interspersing 30 stories, 30 photographs. Nathan's also a photographer, which I don't think you mentioned yet. So the photograph on the front of the second book is also Nathan's, and it's one I gravitated towards right away because of its beautiful color gradation. It's very relevant to the very last story, and I won't say why, because Nathan likes to keep those surprises to the very end. But it maintains some of the typographic hierarchy and structure of the first book for some continuity. And then my favorite part is that it's a photograph that includes the Space Needle, but it's incredibly tiny. It's like maybe a centimeter tall. And when I selected this photo for the cover, we had a long discussion about it, and I was reminded of Lynn Shelton, who passed away some time ago, a filmmaker here in Seattle. And one of the intentions in her filmmaking was to represent Seattle in a way that did not rely on these kind of stereotypical views of Seattle. So the Space Needle almost never featured in her films. It was always neighborhoods, communities, the streets where people lived. And so by making the Space Needle as small as possible, it felt like a slight homage to her and also a great way to connect the stories and bring it back to the first book. So thank you for the opportunity to bring these to life. Thanks, Bruce.
Thank you, Tom. Yes, Tom has an almost perverse desire to not have the Space Needle be on the covers of the books he does. And we went back and forth about maybe the Space Needle would be on the spine and not even on the cover. Very radical. But I like that you chose this picture, which looks nothing, I don't see pictures of Seattle that looks like this. It looks like Phoenix, or it looks like the vast, I don't know, San Fernando Valley or something. And I like that it's dark. Thank you for picking a night photograph, Tom, not just because I drive at night, but because it reinforces visually that the title is a metaphor and not direct. Yes, Quinn, you're having a thought, I can tell.
Well, Tom preempted my my next question, which was about photography. And in your practice as a photographer, why not take the camera on the bus?
It's so tempting. My training is photography and filmmaking. I love making films. We're working on prepping two films for next year. But as soon as you take out the camera, everyone's behavior changes. They become self-conscious. They try to look handsome. They do all this stuff where they close their mouth, and I don't want that. I want truth. And writing seems to be a better way of doing that in these street spaces where people are often concerned about privacy, and I can get at something more truthful, even though of course it's heavily subjectively filtered through my perception. But I think you want that. You don't want the boring surveillance camera, here's the data, somebody was nice to somebody else, big deal. You want it to be human and subjective, yeah, because that's always our experience.
Do you have another story that you might want to read for us?
Quinn, I kind of do. I have a couple. I have a temptation to read a story that's a little bit heavier. Is that all right? Dive in deep. How many of you took transit to get here today? Oh, love seeing those hands. Wow, that means you came over from 3rd Avenue, no doubt. Let's do this. This will be an example of some of the dialogue. Yeah. Okay, I'll stop talking and start reading. This is called It's About Who's Around. It's October 10th, 2020. Is that my boy? And I reply, John, what's going on? Been a long time. In the days of COVID, pleasantries had to be yelled. John entered through the middle door and now stood by it, just behind the temporary Velcro strap, encouraging passengers to keep distance from the operator. We went on like that for a bit, catching up. But right in the middle of it, he hit me with the news. Hey, I just got out of the hospital. I got cancer, man. Cancer? That's terrible. John? Yeah, I got cancer. He said it as though he was trying out the truth of the phrase, seeing how it molded to his reality. Remember the early moments of your traumas when there seemed a chance they might not be true? I got cancer. They said I drink too much. He ducked under the Velcro strap carefully to come closer. The last time someone did that, as you recall, I got spat on. That's a reference to an earlier story. Most of the stories are interlinked. But we have to remember these lives out here have nothing to do with each other. One night someone will scare you, and the next night another man who looks the same, talks the same, dresses, and maybe even smells the same will help you when no one else will. But back to John, the 50-something Latino and fixture on Rainier Avenue whom readers of my first book will remember. From one angle, he was just another alcoholic breaking the rules on a Wednesday night. For me, he was a friend with whom I shared a history, because of whom my life was richer. Yeah, man, he said, I weigh 140 pounds. I used to be 235. Oh no, 140? That's what I weigh. Yeah, doctor said I only got 2 months to live. What? John, that's heavy. 2 months? That cancer's no joke. Yeah, they said 2 months. I was so glad he came up. He came closer because you can't be sensitive from far away. What do you say to 2 months left to live? I was taught to think before speaking and usually do, but in this moment my body led the charge. My soul cut in, interrupting with the only words that could work, with a verb I was surprised by. 2 months? Man, you'll be around longer than that. It was a feeling more than a thought. And that subliminal part of me spoke now with enormous confidence, complete belief in itself. I, who knows cancer kills people, who knows the very concept of beating cancer, is sometimes nothing but cruel advertising. That cancer often comes back, that trying to tear it up tears you up too. That me somehow believed itself when it said, "You got this." "I'm gonna beat it," he says. "You are gonna beat it." I believe hope in the face of certain failure is still beautiful. I do not know why this is. "I'm gonna beat it. Doctor said 2 months." I say, "No way, screw that." 2 months, more like 2 decades. He goes, "I'm gonna beat that cancer." And I go, "You've been through tougher stuff than this. I'll be picking you up 10 years from now, just like I was 10 years ago." As soon as we had made our own glow, it dissipated. Reality set in, and I was thankful he could share its weight with me. John, the tough guy, boisterous, fighter, comic, friend. John stared into the middle distance, staring forward as only a passenger in a vehicle can. He said, "I'm sad, man. It's sad. I was 235 pounds, now I'm 140. They're giving me liquid morphine. They give me a bottle a week." I say, "Man, I bet you can't feel anything." He says, "Nothing, man. I only got 2 months left. They kicked me out of my apartment." And I say, "Man, that's heavy. I'm sorry. Now's the time to hang out with good people. See your family, you know? Maybe you'll beat it, but either way, you want to have good people around you. You still see Valerie?" That's his longtime partner. John was lost in thought. I stayed behind that church there. "Hey, listen, Nate. I hate having to ask you like this, but could you spot me any change? Get something to..." "Oh, John, you know I don't carry any money when I'm working." "I know, it's cool. Hey man, it's always good to see you. I'm gonna get out right here." He cracked a grin. "Don't cut your hair, and stop beating people up." He's saying that because I'm always too nice. There was an echo in his tone, the enthusiasm you expend with great effort in the final moments, covering up the realization that you might never see your listener again. That was how John spoke now. He had decided humor was the note to end on. Good man. An hour later, I would see him, though, with Valerie at his side. More than once during the ride, she would tell me, "It's always good to see me." Finality had crept into our interactions. It encourages sincerity, goodness, truth. She helped John as he moved, slowly, slurringly. "I'm not gonna lie, Nate, I'm drunk right now." Down the aisle with a tender gait as never before. I thought of the sillier times. Him coming up to the door of my bus one afternoon and stopping in mock fright, proclaiming, "Nathan, who did that to your hair?" I know, I had to get it cut. It was getting out of control." And he replies, "You tell me who did that and I'll send him straight to Jesus." I laughed. He'd said, "You gotta get those curls back, bro, like mine. We're like twins. Oh, hey, I saw you walking the other day. You know how to walk?" I'm always sitting driving. Tonight he was moving slower, but he was still John. They sat in the middle of the bus and struck up a conversation with 2 friendly compatriots and a dog. I couldn't hear them, but their arms and smiles said it all. Gestures of togetherness among strangers, dog stories, traveling stories, communion found in exchanging the breeze. I marveled at Valerie and John's stalwart presence in each other's lives, particularly now as they faced the finish line. A kindness in their camaraderie tonight. In the last days, things will not be perfect. There will be pain, shame, unfulfilled dreams. Your favorite people won't all be there. But that's okay. It's not about that. It's about whoever happens to be around. Have a good time with them. Let them bring you up. Wave your arms in the air like John is now, telling another story, listening and laughing, making the most of the in-between moments. A post-sunset bus ride on a forgotten weekday, spent in the company of strangers and friends. That's what living is. Thank you.
Do you feel up for taking some audience questions?
Yes, please think of lots of questions, and please keep your questions brief so we have time for everyone's questions.
And we'll reserve the right to summarize your question. Is there anything from my left side of the room? Yes.
Whatever happened to Travis? Great question. Sometimes you don't see people for years, and then you discover that they've passed on. Other times you see them again and they're totally transformed and they're very excited to tell you that they've got a job, they've got an apartment, their time on the wait list is finally over. Those are some of my favorite moments on the job. I've noticed it's so important for them to tell me that they've made it through whatever they were going through. And I find that fascinating because I'm basically a stranger. I'm just the bus driver. You know, why is it so important for them to tell me? And the reason I think is because I was there when they were at their worst. They probably hid themselves from their friends and family and other people whose opinions they care about. And I was the person who got to see them in that moment, and they want to tell me the distance to which they've risen. As for Travis, I have not seen him again. His girlfriend is still around. I saw her a couple weeks ago, but I don't know what happened to Travis. Very, very smart guy, well-read. I like to think he found some way out, but who knows?
Do we have a question on the right side of the room? Yes?
I read your first book on the bus. I made sure that I read it only on my bus routes.
Amazing.
Nathan, how do you stay empathetic in a job with such challenging situations?
Thank
Thank you for that question, and thank you for reading lines on the bus.
Yeah.
That was fantastic. I remember when that book was very much popular, and I would see people sometimes with a copy of it on my bus while I'm driving. It was so humbling. In terms of empathy, I think there's a little bit of reverse psychology at work. When I was hired on, they said, incontrovertibly, they told us, in 6 months, you will burn out. You're gonna put on a ton of weight, you're gonna hate yourself, you're gonna hate everyone else, you're gonna buy a house and a car, and you will be miserable. You'll have a pension. And they made very clear that this was unavoidable. Senior operators would tell me, oh ho ho, you're happy now. Wait till you do this route or that route at this time. It'll wipe that smile right off your face. And there was almost a malicious glee in this prophecy that I would hear repeatedly. And that's actually very useful to hear because then you can say, you know what, I'm not gonna do any of those things. I'm gonna start eating fruits and vegetables and taking care of my body as I never have before. I'm gonna work on mental health and pay attention to, the things I haven't put a lot of priority on. And those skills, of course, become easier to do the longer you do them. Every day you sort of have to sign up to show up with patience. Being kind takes, of course, extra energy. It also takes more time. It's slower. You have to make time for other people. And nurturing these skills is, driving buses eventually becomes very easy. It's the people part, but bus drivers don't talk about driving, they talk about people. And the customer service part is the part that remains endlessly challenging. I wish there was a magical sentence that you could say that would solve all problems. Tragically, I have not come upon this sentence, and so you have to improvise every time. There's times when I have failed so badly at trying to fix a situation on the bus, and those are the moments when we learn, and you try to figure out, okay, here's what I'll do next. Empathy is something I've always looked up to. It seems to make my life easier as well as those around me. And I feel like all great films are actually about loneliness. And as humans, we're always seeking connection. In interpersonal spaces, we call it love. On the street, it's called respect. You want to be seen and heard. And I noticed in this realm of the street, I do not look like a bodybuilder. I don't have the ability to be authoritative and tell people what to do and have them actually listen to me. The only thing I've got is being friendly. And so trying to get on people's good side, trying to, those are the cards I have. So I'm gonna try to play those cards, as well as I can. And building relationships, having empathy, having compassion seems to work well on a long timeline. Whoever it is, I know that I might see them again. I might see them in 2 hours. It's like that, some relative that you see every year at Thanksgiving that you don't like, but you need to stay on good terms with them, because you'll see them next year. That's how I think about the passengers that are more difficult on the bus, and I try to remind myself There's no prize for being wonderful to people that we like and who agree with us. That's easy to do. It's the folks who feel very differently. How can we behave towards those other folks? I realize I'm doing the thing again, I'm talking forever. One last thing, I once went to a play where this story that I'm about to summarize was gonna be the beginning chapter of the book, but we decided to do something else. I went to a play here in Seattle that was about treatment of women on college campuses. And after the play was over, the playwright was on hand, it was an original play, and he was there to do a Q&A, and somebody asked, okay, this was good. All of us, however, in this sort of progressive, kind of left-leaning city, we probably already all agree with these ideas. How do you reach the people who don't agree? And he sat there for a long time, thinking about what to say, and what he finally said was, what you're really asking is how to change the world. How do you change the world? You don't. You change the person next to you. And how do you do that? Not by trying to change them, because you can't change other people. By leading by example. That's kind of something I try to keep in my head. I didn't put it at the beginning of the book because it's too self-aggrandizing for me. I want this story to I want the book to focus more on the passengers than on me. But that's my very long-winded answer to your question. Thanks for listening.
I shared your story about Alonzo
Yeah.
in this book and the previous one with him.
What does he make of it?
He liked it, you know, he
Okay.
was not talking a lot about it, but
Nathan sees a lot of people who are usually unseen in our society. Nathan, you work in a position in society that's also unseen. You are a bus driver, you are working class. How does that make you feel?
Wow, okay, first I'll respond to the gentleman who shared the story. Thank you for doing that. I've always wondered what he would make of that story and this story. I was hesitant to share it with him because, first of all, I never thought the first book would be popular. It was a real surprise, and so I felt no compunction about putting in stories about people in there. In this one, we've gone to greater lengths to change people's names and so on and respect their privacy. But yeah, I've always been a little nervous to share the story with him. I wasn't, maybe he'd get pissed off. I'm thrilled that he liked it. Because I think he's a hero, and I try to communicate that in the book. Okay, wonderful question about being seen. I'm not sure if I have the requisite self-awareness to give a good answer to that. I feel seen. I feel enormously seen by all of my peeps on the bus routes and by friends and family, etc. And the longer I'm alive, the more pleasure I take in flying under the radar. When you're a teenager, you think you're the most important thing that ever existed. In your 20s, you're trying to prove to the world that you're awesome and amazing. In your 30s, you start to feel a sense of peace with, I am fully myself, who I am right now, and I don't need to win awards in order to be worthy as a human being. I don't need to continue proving to people I'm amazing. I can just exist. And the people who will see me, and those who don't, and that's fantastic. And we start to prioritize quality over quantity in terms of interpersonal relationships. I guess my answer would be that I feel very seen. But this is a new thought, I'm rambling. And this is one of those situations where I'll have a better answer the minute this event is over and I've gone home. And something brilliant will come to mind, and that's not happening right now.
Look for an answer on the blog. Nathan, you built relationships and friendships working in the bus, but as a writer, there's literally an impenetrable barrier between you and the driver a lot of the times. How do you develop relationships? And I'll go even further and ask, how would you ask people to develop relationships with bus drivers in the city?
Okay, wow, this is the question of the bus space. How do we sustain community in a space where the interior geography seems designed to resist community? Some of these stories in the book are old enough that they hail from the times when the buses had steps on them, and there was no shield, and the front seat was right next to the driver. I could reach out and shake their hand while they were right there, and if someone was sitting in that front seat, I'd start talking to them. And Also, I just had an opportunity to go on one of those like historic bus rides. There's a historic vehicle association that has a couple of the old buses, and I hadn't been on any of them in 20 or so years. And to get on one, it was a real shock to realize how much quieter the old buses are. There's no rattling, and it was much easier to have a conversation. I never put that together. And having the people much closer is much easier to have those interactions. Now, I still go out of my way I call out all the bus stops myself instead of having the automatic person do it. I say hello, I say thank you. And people are more withdrawn now for a couple of different reasons in sort of our post-COVID space. But I try to make it feel safe and welcoming and okay for people to share and to speak. And despite these limitations, the shield on the bus, which I absolutely detest, and other elements, people still want to connect. We are the social animal. We spend all this time going around pretending that we're not lonely, seeking connection, and that will not be eradicated in the space of a generation. People do desire that, and I try to present the idea that that's okay. And sometimes it works. And it does feel like an uphill battle for any of us, fighting the Seattle freeze. But isn't it so refreshing to find someone who does that, someone who's good at it? I'm still working on it. It's easy to do at work, at any job. It's easier to talk to people. But it's an uphill battle, but it's worth it. You had your hand up.
I'll interpret the question as customs of ridership.
Ooh.
How people behave themselves as they're entering the bus. I would actually like to hear about people who have passes versus paying the fare in cash versus just walking on the bus. Do you notice kind of personality differences?
Great question. It changes over time and it changes with routes. By having transit be free for such a long time during COVID, it's very difficult for people to go back to paying for something that they have gotten used to not paying for. How many people pay? Maybe half. Maybe it's hard to put a figure on it. Sometimes people pay, sometimes they can pay but they don't want to, and sometimes they cannot pay. It varies by the hour, by the day. Yeah.
I also held a prisoner in 19th century literature.
Yum.
Nathan, in your love for 19th century literature, do you find yourself nostalgic for kind of the social mores of that time, or are there other ways that literature influences you? We can make this also the last question. I'm sorry.
Nostalgia is very tricky. It can be terribly misleading. But there are elements of growing up, not in the 19th century, but in the 20th century, and of reading all those wonderful novels where there was such a standard for getting really comfortable talking to people. And it is a muscle. Talking is the act of constantly improvising and sharing thoughts and finding words for those thoughts. And if you don't, the less you do it, the less good you get at doing it. You get rusty. And the more you do it, the easier it is. And to have an interior mind based on all those books, based on watching classic films, based on hanging out with people of various different ages. I was an only child, and only children always end up hanging out with adults. And so you get normalized to the idea of, oh yeah, you can just talk to people. It's a good skill to know how. And in the 20th century, you had to talk to, if you had a crush on someone, you had to call their landline, and then their mom would answer. And you had to talk to their mom before you talked to their older brother, who'd give you a hard time, and then you talk to whoever it is. And these were skills you couldn't get around. And they can be annoying, but they make us better people. It's the hardship, it's the struggles that cause us to improve our skills. Tess,
Thank you.
are we
Nathan
talking
Voss.
too much?
Yes.
Not at all.
Thank you, everyone. If you have a question, please come up to Nathan. We will
Okay,
get you
yeah.
out in the very back.
Yes, I'll be in the back.
Thank you so much, everyone. Before we break for reception, I just wanted to do a quick round of thank yous. I wanted to thank Bruce Routledge and Aurora Bisoy from choosing the festival. I also wanted to give a very quick and special thank you to Craig. I'm not going to put him on the spot, but he's been wonderful in helping promote this program. We also have a lot of we often have a lot of conversations about how the world is increasingly technocratic and values like connection, seeing, and empathy are preached but not practiced. So I'm so happy to have Nathan here to be a role model for how we can practice kindness. Thank you, Nathan, for being here. And Quinn, thank you for being our fantastic facilitator. You're very helpful. Thank you, Nathan.
I'm gonna stick around, stop by and say hi. I could just keep talking, but I'm gonna go over there and keep talking, so come say hello. Okay, hello. We were gonna read one more story at the event, but we ran out of time. So, for you all watching at home, this is that story. I wanted to end the evening on a high note. 3 stories is better than 2. So here we go. This is called The Nameless Heroes. I can remember it quite clearly. In the late wintry days of 2009, I was riding in the passenger seat of my partner Alicia's small 2-door car. She was driving. We were eastbound on 45th, approaching University Way and looking for dinner, hoping to turn right. In the left lane, at the head of the intersection, was a semi-truck with its emergency flashers on. The right lane, which we were in, was clear, but we stopped behind the truck while remaining in our lane because Alicia wasn't sure what he was planning. The way through looked narrow, what with the huge truck on the left and the looming overhang of trees and uneven sidewalk on the right. The light was a stale green, and we let it cycle out. Maybe the truck was going to attempt a wide right, or back up, or something. After a full light cycle, nothing had changed. The semi was still sitting there in the left lane, at the very front, with its 4-ways on, motionless. The light was newly green. We began to drive forward. Her car was passing by the truck, which was still stopped. We were getting through, about to make our right turn. Soon we would be clear. But we would never be clear. That moment would never arrive. Because now the truck was a moving shape, simultaneously fast and slow, an unstoppable living glacier. A beast awakened and angling into us with force. I do not remember sound. There was only the inexorable quality of this massive object. A figure in your dreams coming closer, governed by laws outside your understanding, the kind you know you can't escape. The truck's trailer now, filling our vision from the left. A mass of aluminum white cast in sodium street lamp orange. He was also turning right onto University Way, whether or not we mattered. Alicia's little car didn't stand a chance. I wanted to tell her to honk, to really lay on it, but the moment was too large. In times of extremity, we are reduced to children, awestruck by the strange and terrible newness of it all. Here is her car on the sidewalk, tires forced sideways, the trailer forcing us up and over the curb, me briefly wondering, is that even possible? We are on the corner, with the moving semi-trailer on the left and a steel utility pole on the right. The car is getting smaller now, crunching together, but without sound, as the truck continues pushing in from our left with the utility pole standing firm on the right. I remember Alicia's hair, lit by the light of the drugstore opposite, her hands on a now useless steering wheel, a frantic question in the darkness. The side door on my right is crumpling, and I notice my passenger seat is becoming smaller. People are starting to stare. The ever-moving crowd is slowing. I register still figures in my periphery. But against that stasis, one of them is running out there, a middle-aged woman. Hers is the only voice I can hear, screaming, clapping her hands at the truck driver, her arms making big waves as she races in front of his gigantic vehicle. It's a homeless woman, steadfastly standing in the truck's path and yelling at him, pointing at us. She's thinking about our lives, not hers. Only then did the truck stop. Alicia checked if I was okay, then immediately got out to ask if the truck driver was all right. Wow, I remember thinking. What a tremendous soul she is. I learned from such giants, the lovers and friends who've been kind enough to share their passing lives with me. I stepped out of the vehicle slowly. We 3 involved were uninjured. Alicia and the truck driver and the homeless woman were talking. People were pointing. The time for rapt staring was over, and the period of gesticulated arguments was underway. I wandered around, stopping often. Sometimes someone would ask what happened or if I was okay, but I didn't feel like answering. I found myself looking up beyond all this noise, noticing the age of the upper stories of the buildings. How long had they been here? I looked at the contrast of the indigo sky with the neon brilliance of the storefront signage. I noticed with irony that we were blocking a bus. Hands in my pockets, walking with legs that worked. I was alive. Where was the homeless woman? I needed to thank her. Her life had offered a half-century's worth of experiences which collectively led her to be the type of person who would run out there. Without a second thought, who believed this was the right and necessary thing to do. My able-bodiedness was due to her decision and nothing else. But she was already disappearing into the crowd. I returned to that intersection often in the months afterwards, looking at the faces lining the sidewalk, hoping to see her again and thank her. What did she even look like? The face was receding from memory. I can still see the figure, though. To this day, fresh behind my closed eyes, a spirit who cares for others without thinking. If someone saves your life, they will probably be a stranger. Whether following cruel chance or my own stupid mistakes, there are people who've stepped in to help me when they didn't have to. I'm hugely grateful. With reference to the above story, I've heard the homeless crew on University Way described as lowlifes, losers, hobos, garbage, gutter trash, parasites, bums, bloodsuckers, scumbags, grifters, and indigents. I have to add one more name. Angels. Thank you for listening. Thank you for supporting local authors. You don't have to like or subscribe. You could buy the book, though. That would be delightful. And thanks for listening. Wow. Take good care.